This recorded public scoping presentation goes over possible changes the South Atlantic Council is considering for for-hire reporting. This applies to federal charter or headboat permit holders participating in the snapper grouper, dolphin wahoo, or coastal migratory pelagic fisheries. My name is Myra Brouwer. My colleague John Hadley and I are the points of contact for this amendment. In this presentation, first, I'll start off telling you a little bit about the Council, then I'll explain the scoping process, and then we'll go over the suite of possible changes in detail. And at the end of the presentation, there will be information on how to provide your comments. The South Atlantic Council is one of 8 regional management councils that were created in 1976 to manage fisheries in the U.S. The South Atlantic Council's area of jurisdiction is the exclusive economic zone, which is the waters from 3 to 200 miles off the coast of North Carolina through the Florida Keys. You can see that area outlined in red in the map. Council members include recreational and commercial fishery stakeholders, state agency representatives, and federal agency representatives. The 13 voting members include the agency reps from each state, 2 citizen reps from each state, and the Southeast Regional Administrator of NOAA Fisheries. The Council's role in the management process is to develop management plans for South Atlantic fisheries and recommend regulations to NOAA Fisheries. NOAA Fisheries considers the Council's recommendations and implements and enforces fishery regulations in federal waters. So what is scoping? Scoping is a first phase of developing an amendment. This is when the Council informs the public of management issues that may need to be changed or revised, and the public gets to provide input to the Council. Amendments to a fishery management plan include actions that describe the types of changes being considered and alternatives, which are options under each action. For example, requiring reporting at the end of the day or after every trip are potential alternatives under the action to change the frequency of reporting. The goal of scoping is to identify what actions and alternatives will be on the table, so to speak, for consideration in an amendment. And after these have been fleshed out and there's been analysis, there will be another opportunity for public input when the Council will ask for feedback on which alternatives should be selected for implementation. So what is being scoped? The Council is considering changes to the for-hire reporting requirements of federally permitted vessels to improve compliance with reporting, also to improve the accuracy of the information that is being collected and make them usable in management, while at the same time minimizing burden for for-hire captains. As I said before, this amendment would cover 3 fishery management plans: snapper grouper, dolphin wahoo, and coastal migratory pelagics. And again, it would apply to federally permitted charter and headboat vessels that have permits in those 3 fisheries. So first, let's go over some background. In 2017, the Council submitted the Comprehensive For-Hire Reporting Amendment, and that's the amendment that put in place the current requirements for federally permitted charter vessels in those 3 fisheries. And the amendment also modified the reporting frequency for headboats. This amendment resulted in the creation of the Southeast For-Hire Integrated Electronic Reporting Program, or CFIRE, which is a program that's run by NOAA Fisheries, and it got started in 2021. There are 2 components of that program, one for the Gulf and one for the South Atlantic. The Gulf's CFIRE program ceased to operate in February of 2023 after a court order. So the Gulf Council is working on an amendment to revamp and reestablish that program. Another component of for-hire data collection is a Southeast Region Headboat Survey, which has been operating in the region since the 1970s, and it collects data from all federally permitted headboats in the South Atlantic and the Gulf. Now let's go over why the Council is considering changes. So since the CFIRE program was stood up, the Council has been receiving updates regularly at their meetings. And in late 2023, the Council was told there was low compliance with reporting requirements and that there would need to be some changes to improve compliance and the way the information is collected to make sure those data are able to be used in management. So in June of 2024, the council began thinking about what needed to change. And also by this time, the Gulf Council was already working on an amendment to reestablish for hire reporting in that area. And also the Highly Migratory Species Division of NOAA Fisheries was going through the process of changing for hire reporting requirements for those permits. So there's a lot going on in as far as reporting goes, and the council realizes how important it is to maintain consistency as much as possible in the requirements to lessen the burden on for-hire permit holders, while also at the same time making sure the information collected is able to be used in management. Okay, so now we'll get into the possible changes, and this slide just lists the actions that I'm going to walk you through. I'm going to go over these each individually. So first off is modifying the reporting frequency and the timing of report submission. So right now, all permit holders participating in the charter and headboat components of the 3 fisheries have to report data for each trip and submit all reports by the Tuesday of the following week. So the reporting frequency could change to maybe daily or every 48 hours or some other frequency. The main thing this action could also do to improve the data being collected is to require reporting before arriving at the offloading location. So here there could also be a time requirement associated with it. For example, an hour before offloading passengers or some other time. And this action would be coupled to a trip notification requirement that I will talk about next. But first, I have this table here that summarizes the current requirements under the various programs that collect for hire data. So for Seafire and the Headboat Survey, reporting is required weekly, as you can see on the far left. In the Gulf, there are no requirements right now because that program is not operating, but the Gulf Council is looking at the same suite of options as the South Atlantic Council is considering. In the Greater Atlantic region, there are requirements to submit electronic vessel trip reports, or VTRs, daily or every 48 hours. And then on the far right of this table, you can see for HMS, highly migratory species, there are a couple of ways to report currently. You can do so electronically, by telephone, or using catch cards. And the proposed change there is to require electronic reporting 24 hours after the end of each trip. Okay, so the trip notification goes hand in hand, as I said, with the reporting prior to arriving at the landing locations. So for that to be possible, captains would have to report that they are going on a for-hire trip or returning from a trip, or maybe both. The options here are to determine which trips would require this notification. Should it be all trips involving fishing, or also trips involving paying passengers that aren't fishing trips, like sunset trips or dolphin watching cruises? A trip notification requirement would help with enforcing reporting requirements and also to get better effort data. Another thing that's being considered is establishing approved landing locations. The council may require this, and simply this would be a list of locations where for-hire vessels are offloading, and it would support enforcement and monitoring for compliance with reporting, can also help to improve sampling intercepts, and facilitate validation of the reported data. And we'll be talking about validation here in a minute. A landing location would simply be the street address where fish and passengers are expected to be offloaded, and it can be a public or a private location. So requiring participation in a validation survey. This would be an important improvement to the program. Validation simply refers to the action of checking or proving the validity or accuracy of something. So in this case, a validation survey would be used to check the accuracy of the information that's been reported. Validating self-reported data is important to allow managers to measure the accuracy of the data that they are going to then include in the management process. There is currently no requirement to participate in a validation survey, so that means that fishermen have the option of answering survey questions from a port agent or not. This action would make it mandatory for those holding federal charter headboat permits to participate in a survey if they are approached by a port sampler. Revising reporting of economic data is also being considered for charter vessels. This is a requirement that is already in place for both headboats and charter vessels that have those federal permits in the 3 fisheries. A small portion of the for-hire fleet that participates in those fisheries is home ported outside of the South Atlantic Council's jurisdiction, in the Mid-Atlantic or in the New England region. But because those vessels have the Southeast permits, they are still required to report economic data to be able to participate in the fishery and to renew the permits at the end of each year. This action would narrow the scope of that participation to only a sample of all for-hire permits. So it would go from a census approach to a sampling approach. And the idea here would be to encourage compliance and then get, obviously, better information. Modification of the did not fish reports may also be considered. These did not fish reports are already a requirement, and they can be submitted up to 30 days in advance. And this is to allow more flexibility to for-hire captains when they know they won't be scheduling trips for a while, or when the vessel is out for repairs, for example. The feedback the Council has received from NOAA Fisheries is that DNF reports are helpful, so there may not need to be any changes to this requirement. And here is a table showing you what is currently in place and what is being proposed under the various data collection programs regarding this, the DNF reports. So where are we in the process? So here's where we are. At the beginning of the presentation, I explained what scoping is. Basically, it's a heads up that the Council may be making some changes, and it's an opportunity for the public to weigh in. If the Council decides to continue with this amendment, they would be approving it for public hearings at the end of this year. And so that would be another opportunity for the public to give feedback. By then, the Council will have narrowed down the list of actions and alternatives, and there will be some analysis to go with them. And if things continue on track, we'd be looking at changes becoming effective in sometime in 2027, late 2027 or early 2028. So to summarize, the Council is looking for feedback on whether to change the frequency of reporting and the timing of the reports, when a trip notification should be required, and more general input on the other elements that I've covered in this presentation and you can see on your screen. This scoping process is being conducted online through a document that's posted to the Council's website and through this recorded presentation. There will not be a live webinar or meeting for this process, but feel free to rewatch this presentation and reference the accompanying document as needed. And additionally, if you have clarifying questions about the process or where the Council is in the discussions about these topics thus far, please feel free to contact me, Myra Brouwer, or John Hadley. Our phone numbers and email addresses are there on the screen. Written comments can be submitted online. There's the link to the Improvements to For-Hire Reporting Amendment page. You can also send in written comments via mail or fax using the information on the screen. We do ask that all comments be submitted by 5 o'clock on May 8th. This concludes the recorded presentation. Thank you for your time, attention, and interest in South Atlantic Council Fisheries Management.